You know, the next time you're in your kitchen, just grab any packaged food or medicine. You probably glance at the ingredient list and don't think twice, right? You just trust that it's accurate, that what's inside is safe. But where did that trust actually come from? Well, it was forged more than a century ago in a really fierce battle over what you eat and drink.
See, at the turn of the 20th century, the American marketplace was pretty much the Wild West. And this cartoon here, called Death's Laboratory, it just perfectly captures how people felt. Consumers were trying to navigate this total minefield of products that promised miracle cures, but, well, they often delivered poison instead. With zero rules and no one watching, you had absolutely no idea what you were really buying.
But then, things started to change, thanks to muckraking journalists like Samuel Hopkins Adams. His incredible series in Collier's magazine, which he called The Great American Fraud, wasn't just some article, it was a full-blown indictment. He ripped the curtain back on this dangerous, deceptive world of patent medicines, and honestly, the public was completely horrified.
So you might be wondering, just how bad was it really? Let's take a look. As America industrialized, food started traveling way farther to get from the farm to the city, and a lot of producers took some shocking shortcuts. With no federal oversight, the main goal wasn't public safety, it was all about profit, no matter what it took.
And listen, these weren't just a few bad apples. This stuff was terrifyingly common. I mean, we're talking about soothing syrups for fussy babies that were packed with morphine, milk and meat being preserved with formaldehyde, yeah, the same stuff used for embalming. So-called cancer cures that were just colored water and alcohol. This practice of adulteration was everywhere, from mixing chalk into milk to putting sawdust in bread, all just to save a buck. The stakes for the average family, they were incredibly high.
Okay, so this chaos, it just couldn't last forever. It actually sparked a huge national movement for reform. And this is the story we usually hear, right? It's a classic tale of heroes fighting for the little guy, a crusade for public health and safety against all that corporate greed.
And of course, every good crusade needs its champions. Leading the charge was Dr. Harvey Washington Wiley, the government's top chemist. He was backed by his now famous Poison Squad, a group of unbelievably brave volunteers we'll talk more about in just a second. And all of their scientific work got a huge boost from the shocking stories coming from writers like Upton Sinclair and Samuel Hopkins Adams.
So how in the world do you prove that common preservatives are actually dangerous? Well, for Dr. Wiley, the answer was kind of simple. You test them on people. He got a dozen healthy young men to agree to eat all their meals laced with increasing doses of chemicals like borax and formaldehyde. The press nicknamed them the Poison Squad, and their motto was, "Only the brave dare eat the fair." The sickness that followed gave them the hard, scientific evidence that Congress just couldn't ignore anymore. This whole combination was basically a knockout punch. On one side, you had the cold, hard science from the Poison Squad. On the other, you had this explosion of public outrage, fueled by books like Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. President Theodore Roosevelt, who was a reformer himself, couldn't fight the pressure. So on June 30th, 1906, he signed the Pure Food and Drug Act into law.
So what did this new law actually do? Well, it wasn't really about banning products completely. At its heart, it was a truth in labeling law. For the first time ever, it was illegal to flat out lie about what was in your product or to sell something that was dangerously messed with. It was a totally revolutionary first step.
So, there you have it. The public was saved from poison and lies by a band of heroic reformers. A super clear story of good versus evil, right? Well, that's where our story takes a really fascinating turn. Because, as you might have guessed, that's not the whole story. You see, there's another way to look at all of this. A perspective that suggests the fight for pure food wasn't just about public health. It was also about big business, special interests, and this idea called cronyism. What even is cronyism? Well, basically, it's when powerful businesses use government regulations not to serve the public, but to serve themselves, often by creating rules that actually crush their smaller competitors. It's using the law itself to get an unfair advantage. Think about this so-called beef trust. We're talking the giants of the meatpacking industry, like Armour and Swift. Now, you'd think they'd be dragged kicking and screaming into this new world of regulation. But actually, historical records show they were some of the law's biggest fans, actively lobbying Congress to pass it. Why on earth would they do that?
And this reveals two totally different motives for the same law. The public interest view is obvious, protect consumers. But the cronyism view? Well, the big packers realized that a federal inspection stamp, paid for, by the way, was a brilliant marketing tool. And Even more important, they knew they could afford the expensive new upgrades, while their smaller rivals couldn't. Regulation became a weapon to crush their competition.
And look, this wasn't some secret plan. Here we have Thomas Wilson, a manager for one of the biggest meat packers, telling Congress exactly what he wanted. He actually complained that small firms had an advantage, and he saw federal regulation as the way to get rid of it. I mean, it's a pretty stunning admission of what was really going on.
So, did their plan work? Oh yeah, it worked. The numbers here speak for themselves. In just 4 years, the number of meat packers doing business across state lines just plummeted from over 900 to only 300. The law did exactly what the Beef Trust hoped it would. It consolidated the market and wiped out hundreds of their competitors.
So what do we make of all this? What is the real legacy of this law? Well, the 1906 Act was without a doubt a landmark, but its legacy is complicated. It's a story of both real consumer protection and very calculated corporate privilege.
And despite all the progress, that original law was full of holes. By the 1930s, the Food and Drug Administration, the agency that was born from the 1906 Act, actually created this exhibit they nicknamed the Chamber of Horrors, just to show Congress all the dangerous products that were still perfectly legal. Take Lashler, for example. It was an eyelash dye that had a toxic chemical in it. It caused horrific eye injuries, and it even blinded some women. But because the 1906 law didn't cover cosmetics, there was nothing the government could do to stop them from selling it.
The final straw, though, was a terrible tragedy in 1937. A company started marketing a new wonder drug as a liquid elixir. The problem? The solvent they used was basically antifreeze. It killed more than 100 people, a lot of them kids. That disaster finally forced the government's hand, leading to the 1938 Act that required drugs to be proven safe before they hit the market. And that's the foundation of the modern FDA we have today. This whole history lesson brings us right back to the present day, because the very complicated story of the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act raises a really fundamental question about regulation itself, and it's a question we are still grappling with today across all kinds of industries.
Who should a regulation truly serve? Is it for the protection of the public, or can it become a tool for the very industry it's supposed to be watching? The story of the 1906 law shows us that sometimes the answer is, well, it's both. And that messy, complex reality is definitely something worth remembering.